We take so much of life for granted: the clean air, the clouds in the sky, the sun that gives energy and life to all things, the earth beneath our feet, the seemingly endless supply of food and oil and resources. But these are all finite things. We have to start appreciating and having more respect and reverence for all these natural finite qualities. The earth is really at a critical point where resources are running out and Mother Earth is getting quite sick. Most of our oceans and waterways are poisoned and toxic. So many animal species, birds and insects are going extinct. We have so many creatures that are confused with the bioelectrical signals that our satellite and all our technology is disrupting on the planet. We are at a very critical time where human beings need to wake up and pay attention and be responsible for what we're creating and how our lives are affecting all the other lives that are just as important. In today's busy world, how can we find the inspiration, knowledge, and energy to live a healthy and empowered life? If we balance and harmonize our mind, exercise our body, live according to the laws of nature, and connect to spirit, can we find a way to heal, become our authentic self, and live our purpose with love? I am your hostess, Amy Fournier, and welcome back to Awakening Aphrodite. Hey, welcome back to the show. I'm so glad that you're here with me today. Today's a solo cast, so it's just me and you today. And I'm going to share with you someone that has been a mentor to me. Although I did not have the pleasure and honor and opportunity to meet him in real life because he is now deceased, Ted Andrews has been someone whose work I have been studying profusely and very intensely within the last few years. He is, I will dare say, a legend in the area of shamanism and understanding nature and all things mystical. Let me actually read to you a little bio on him. I mean, this guy was tremendously prolific. I think before he passed away, he wrote almost 40 books. Last I counted, he was up to 36. And I actually have 4 of his books and like 3 of his audiobooks and trying to work my way through all of them. But I wanted to share him with you and some of his teachings with you because his work has changed my life profoundly. And again, I don't take it lightly when I refer to him as a mentor of mine. And just for that matter, mentors in our lives can be people just like I'm referring to Ted Andrews. I never met him, but I think of him emotionally as a mentor of mine because his work has touched me so deeply and changed the way I live my life and do my job. And, so I consider him a mentor. We don't have to think of mentors as just, someone in our actual life that we know, like our grandma or whatever, so just think of anyone who's really profoundly affected the trajectory of your life. They could really be a mentor of yours. And certainly, if you study them and incorporate their teachings as part of your life. So Ted Andrews was a full-time author, student, and teacher in the metaphysical and spiritual fields. He conducted seminars, symposiums, workshops, and lectures on ancient mysticism and focused on translating esoteric material to make it comprehensible and practical to everyone. In fact, Ted would be known to attend like hundreds of conferences and workshops in one year, like just all over the country, if not all over the world. He was extremely popular in speaking with children. He has such a magical way of telling stories. His knowledge of nature and the fairy realm and the animal kingdom and of mythology is truly just remarkable. And he would convey that in his teachings and his workshops every time he spoke. So he just touched so many people and has taught us all so much. He was certified in basic hypnosis and acupressure, and was also involved in the study and the use of herbs as an alternative path in holistic health care. And he was also trained in the piano, which is very kind of interesting as a side note. Ted employed the Celtic harp, the bamboo, the flute, and various shaman rattles, drums, Tibetan bells, the shaman singing bowl, the Tibetan singing bowl, and quartz crystal bowls, which helped him create individual healing therapies and introduced higher states of consciousness. Ted was most certainly a clairvoyant, and he worked with past life analysis and synthesis, as well as aura interpretation, dreams, numerology, and the tarot. Ted was a contributing author to various metaphysical magazines and published articles on various topics, including occult Christianity, working with our angelic brethren, and the metaphysical mirrors within our lives. Like I mentioned, he was the author of close to 40 books, if not at least 40 books. And Ted passed from this world in 2009. So I'm going to be referring to one of his probably most prominent books, which most people know, and some people even refer to it as their second Bible, known as Animal Speak. As of date, there is over 600,000 copies of Animal Speak sold. Animal Speak goes into the spiritual and magical powers of creatures great and small. And it actually includes a dictionary of animals, birds, reptiles, and all their symbolism, how we can understand what these magical creatures have to teach us about our lives. So I'm going to be referring to that in today's show to share with you. And I'm actually thinking I'm going to most likely do this as a little mini series, with this being the first one, because I want to share with you some of the really prominent animal totems, are also known as animal spirit guides. I know I have 7 spirit guides for each one of my chakras that I have discovered. So I have different animals that are with me in my life all the time. And I want to share with you some of the more common ones that people have and what these animals' symbolism is for us, because it's quite fascinating to learn this about ourselves. You know, we all want to have that connection with our soul, our divine self, the divine that's in us. And whether you call it God or Great Spirit or Allah or whatever it is to you, most likely you believe in some kind of higher creative force, and a benevolent force at that, and that we are all one, and this source of unconditional love that's in each of us. You know, it's what created us. It's what we will return to when we leave this earth. We're all from the same place and going back to the same place eventually. I think a lot of us, particularly in this day and age where humanity is really on the brink of a huge awakening and a major crossroads, which way we're going to go, we're looking for communication and connection, not only with ourselves and each other, but with the divine. So I wanted to take this time at this episode to share with you some of my study of Ted Andrews' work, because it really helps me in my everyday practical life feel and understand and see and be aware of the divine around me all the time. Because we're not taught this stuff. We aren't taught how to look for signs of the divine, how the spirit world communicates, how animals communicate, how animals are conduit and vehicles for the divine to communicate to us, how nature is a huge way that we can connect to our soul and with the divine. But we're not taught to understand this language, this communication. But guess what? People like Ted Andrews are great teachers. There's so many mystics and ancient elders and shaman, and all this work is starting to have a revitalization. I'm so glad in our modern culture, because people are looking for answers. They're looking for truth. They're looking for connection. They're looking for fulfillment. They're looking for meaning in life. And again, looking for direction. And God knows you're not going to find it on TV or social media or mass media. We really need to go back to basics. And you know, it's funny. I think it's actually Bearheart, if you haven't heard it already, the episode with Molly Larkin on my show, who was one of Bearheart's, who was a Native American shaman. And he had her, Molly Larkin, as an apprentice. And she's going to be on my show sharing with us his wisdom. But I think it was actually Bearhart who had said that, everyone's into this new age stuff right now. Like it's something new, getting back to our spirituality and divination and connecting with the divine in the everyday. But as Bearhart says, it's not. This has been practiced for eons and thousands of years in all the different cultures and generations. They would pass this traditional knowledge and wisdom and medicine on to their generations and people from the wise elders. It's just nowadays, we put this label of new age on it and thinking it's something newly discovered, but no, my friend, it is not. We're really getting back to basics again, because as we've gotten more advanced and complicated and fancy in our 5G and faster internet download and multitasking and all this crazy stuff and digital world, we've realized that, a lot of it is really not fulfilling. A lot of it is very empty, and our rates of suicide and depression and anxiety are higher than ever. Not to mention Americans are sicker than ever, more medicated than ever, not sleeping, more overweight than ever. We're having more fertility problems. These are all things related to being not aligned with how we were designed to live. Now, let me get clear. I am not saying I'm anti-technology. In fact, I wouldn't have the pleasure of being here with you today if we didn't have technology. I'm grateful for technology. Everything has a time and a place and a role. The problem is when we have it out of balance, right? When we rely on technology too much, looking to it as a source to fulfill needs that it can't fulfill, because there's no substitution for in the flesh connection with someone. There's no substitution for feeling someone's energy when you're in their space. We know that the heart is the greatest electromagnetic emitter in the body, more than the brain. That research has shown that the heart can emit electricity up to 6 feet away from us, if not at least 3 feet. And those people that have a higher life force, meaning they're more aligned in mind, body, and spirit, they've got their diet really dialed in, they're drinking enough water, they're getting to bed in time, they're turning off technology so it's not screwing up their neurochemistry, and they're really dialed in. Those people have an even stronger electromagnetic force and radiation. The heart that they have can actually emit much stronger and further forces, and you can feel their energy. We all know, we've been around people where they just quote unquote feel like good energy, right? They bring good energy. Well, that's not by coincidence. So we know that feeling can only happen when you're in someone's presence, is what I'm getting at. And it can't happen in the digital realm, and it certainly can't happen if someone's wearing a mask and has half their face covered, and you can't see the centuries of DNA, cellular memory, and learning that we as humans have evolved to learn how to communicate with each other. We learn facial expressions, little innuendos, little changes of the eyebrow, the creases of the mouth, the body posture, not to mention the pheromones of how someone smells that we can't physically actually smell, but our body registers it. These are all things that digital technology cannot convey. And they're all part of the reason why digital technology is not fulfilling. It's not meeting our needs for connecting with other human beings. We are social creatures. We require being around other human beings to be happy. And there's no coincidence that one of the most strict forms of punishment that prisoners can get in prisons is isolation, right? Putting it in a tank by themselves or under the ground in the hole, isolated from other people. Because, and don't get me wrong, I'm all for, doing your own time, your quiet time. It's very important, essential, doing your hermit time, and, everyone having a season and a winter to kind of go within and hibernate, so to speak, to come back out in the spring, right? So everything has a season and a cycle. It's important. But the problem is when we feel like we are not getting that connection ever met. And you will always feel like you're in a winter. You're always going to feel like you're depressed and you're not connected if you're turning too much to digital technology for those connections. And that even goes with FaceTime and Zoom and all that stuff. It's better than nothing, that's for sure, particularly if you're in lockdown or isolated or any of that. But it can't take the place for in the flesh contact. And I talk a lot about that in many of my episodes. Okay, so we're going to get into the work of Ted Andrews today, like I mentioned in his landmark book, Animals Speak, The Spiritual and Magical Powers of Creatures Great and Small. And I want to share with you one of the quotes in the book. It's from The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. Realizing that visible bodies are only symbols of invisible forces, the ancients worshipped the divine power through the lower kingdoms of nature. The sages of old studied living things to point a realization that God is most perfectly understood through a knowledge of his or her supreme handiwork, which was animate and inanimate nature. Every existing creature manifests some aspect of the intelligence or the power of the Eternal One. So that's just a little quote to meditate on. All right, so like I said, this is going to be a series where I go into different animal spirit guides in the future, like the horse and the dog and the eagle and some of the most popular ones, even like the mouse and and the snake, to help us understand all these creatures, and probably the more common ones that are found in the Northeast if you're from the United States. And that would be like deer and squirrel and certainly some of the birds. But this show is going to lay the foundation for that. Okay. All right. So we're going to talk starting about the spiritual and magical rules of nature. So the cool thing is there was a time when humanity recognized itself as part of nature, and nature as part of itself. Dreaming and waking were inseparable realities. The natural and the supernatural merged and they blended together. People used images of nature to express this unity and to instill a transpersonal kind of experience. And in the past, shamans, priests, and priestesses were the keepers of the sacred knowledge of life. These individuals were tied to the rhythms and forces of nature. They were capable of walking the threads that link the invisible and the visible worlds. They helped people remember that all trees are divine and that all animals speak to those who listen. And that's going to be a key theme that you're going to learn today, is that you will get the communication when you actually ask for it, when you take the time to notice and observe and pay attention. It's going to be a big takeaway from today. I'm just giving you a little preview. When you're done listening to today's show, start paying attention and literally ask nature and great spirit to communicate to you that your heart, your mind, your soul is now open to receiving this communication, this wisdom, to not only understand yourself better, but understand your world better and to be guided divinely. But it all starts with asking and then being open and open-minded and then paying attention. Okay. So the early priest and priestess magicians would adopt the guise of animals, wearing skins and masks to symbolize a reawakening and endowing of one's specific energies. They perform rituals in accordance with the natural rhythms of the seasons to awaken further fertility and life. To them, every species and every aspect of its environment had the power to remind them of what they could manifest within their own life. And that's something I want you to keep in mind. We are all one. We're all from the same source. Everything you see around you is a projection and a part of you. We are the microcosm in the macrocosm. Animals and nature can teach us that every single creature, whether it be a tick or a bug or a beautiful black panther, there's some aspect in that creature that is not only important, but significant and part of who you are. There's something in that creature that was made from the divine that also made you. And since we're all one, there's a part of that creature in you. And then what we're going to learn through this series is when certain animals show up in your life, whether they be literally, physically show up in your life one day while you're walking the dog or whatever, or on vacation, or in your dreams, which is actually the majority of your life and your subconscious, that those animals are not by accident, that they are in your life for a reason, and you're going to learn why. And each one of them has a very specific type of message and what's called medicine, animal medicine, to deliver to your soul that you can then pay attention to, acknowledge, thank, and then ponder about, okay, how does this apply to my life right now? Is this a warning? Is this something going on? And we're going to get into examples of that, okay? Because of each one has their own specific thing, all right? So the shaman, the priestesses, and the priests were expert at being the conduit for the cultures to really make sure that they were downloading this wisdom, this communication from divine spirit and from the animal kingdom. It was an aid to bridge the natural world to the supernatural, awakening the realities of both within the environment of their own lives. So though these rituals and behaviors may seem silly, they are getting more popular now again and getting a resurgence, like I said. They're no less powerful today than they once were. Different societies express these laws in their own unique ways, but probably the most distinctly expressed is the ancient Hermetic Law of Correspondence. Now, I'm sure you've heard this law, the Law of Correspondence. You ready? Say it with me. As above, so below. As below, so above. Okay, so that's the famous Hermetic Law of Correspondence. And I'm planning on actually doing another solo cast on the 7 Hermetic principles, which are actually the basis and foundation for all our modern psychology, astrology, math, physics. Everything is actually based on the Hermetic principles. And one of the 7 is the Law of Correspondence, which again is the law that says, as above, so below, as below, so above. This principle teaches that all things are connected and have a significance. It's like the inside is the outside is the inside, right? So we cannot separate the physical from the spiritual, the visible from the invisible. This principle gives one the meaning of solving many dark paradoxes and the hidden secret of nature. The ancient Hermeticists considered this principle as one of the most important mental instruments by which people were able to pry aside the obstacles which hid from view the unknown mystery. This enables people to understand and reason the intelligence from the known to the unknown. It is for this reason that a study of nature totems or spirit guides is essential for understanding how the spiritual is manifesting within our natural everyday life. Ted Andrews refers to them as totems. I've been trained to refer to them as spirit guides. So I'll be using those terms interchangeably. But it's good to note that a totem can be defined as basically just any natural object, being, or animal to whose phenomena and energy you feel closely associated with during your life. When we pay attention to and acknowledge a nature totem or spirit guide, we're honoring the essence that lies behind it. We're opening up and attuning to that essence. We can then use it to understand our own life circumstances more closely. We can share in its power or medicine. Nature totems or spirit guides, especially animals, are symbols of specific kinds of energy we are manifesting and aligning in our life. The animal becomes a symbol of a specific force of the invisible spiritual realm that's manifesting in your life. The characteristics and activities of those totems or spirit guides will reveal much about your own innate powers and abilities. Like I said, you just apply it to what's going on to your life. So by studying the totem and then learning to merge with it, you are able to call upon its archetypal energy whenever needed. This is when it gets really powerful. So terrestrial animals have always had a strong symbology associated with them. They have represented the emotional side of life, often reflecting qualities that must be overcome, controlled, and or repressed. They are also symbols of power, powers associated with the invisible realm that we can learn to manifest within the visible. So cool. Then birds have been considered the symbols of the soul. And I probably need to do a whole show on bird and feather magic. Their ability to fly reflects the ability within us to rise to new awareness, bridging the earth and the heavens. As totems or spirit animals, birds each have their own particular characteristics, but they can all be used to simulate greater flights of hope, inspiration, and ideas. They've been known to connect the heavens and the earth and to take our intentions, our prayers, and deliver them up to Great Spirit high in the sky. I know the indigenous cultures would refer to them as their second brothers because, like humans, they can walk on two legs. Bears were the same way, which was very unique. Birds, bears, and humans. So they would think of them as in a very special, sacred own category of their own. And birds are so amazing because not only could they walk or hop, they can fly. So they would always fascinate humans of just watching birds fly is so amazing. And some of them can swim too. So birds are very powerful. I've developed a brand new relationship with all the birds that I see in my world. And also we have aquatic life. Water is a classic ancient symbol of the astral plane and the creative element of life. It's also a symbol for the feminine and our emotions. Various fish and other forms of aquatic life symbolize guidance to specific expressions of intuition and creative imagination. They can reflect the feminine side of our essence. And finally, insects. Insects are also a part of nature, and they can be totems for us as well. From the bee of fertility in Egypt to the mantis of the African bushman to the many tales of the spider woman who created the universe, they hold a dynamic place within the spiritual scheme of nature. So by studying and reading about animals, birds, fish, insects, reptiles, etc., that you encounter in your life, you can understand more about the circumstances you also encounter. You can learn much about the kind of energies you are most likely to confront and those you're most able to manifest within your own day-to-day life circumstances. You will learn how to draw upon those energies most effectively in dealing with life situations. That is something that I've learned to do almost daily when I learned my 7 chakra power animals. Whenever an animal comes into my everyday world, I've made it a very conscious thing to be open and paying attention to the signs from nature around me. And when a certain animal appears in my day, I now know to look into that animal. What's the deal with this animal? What are its characteristics? And when did it occur? And where did it occur? And what was I thinking about when I saw it? All these things are a way that my soul will communicate to me what Great Spirit wants me to know in that moment or that day. Sometimes it can be an answer to a prayer or help I've been asking for that's been a while, and all of a sudden it'll come to me through an animal or a situation in the environment, in nature. And sometimes it's more immediate than that. It's a problem I'm dealing with right at that moment that I was thinking about. And then there's a correlation and association. So that's how I apply it to my life. And it's really, really changed the way that I live and think, that's for sure. So, nature has bestowed upon us, its inhabitants, a natural ability for adaptation. This enables the animal to live in a particular place and in a particular way. So this is something that we as humans can really learn from because, again, animals are our teachers. They have their instincts, right? They don't overthink things and analyze things to death and live in their head and go by things that they were taught and programmed. They follow their instincts. Like my little Charlotte, I always say she's my little 5-pound dog. I call her my furry Buddha. She is one of my greatest teachers. She sleeps when she's tired. She eats when she's hungry. She stops when she's full. She doesn't keep eating because she's having anxiety. Or, and when, she's bored, she'll just go get her ball and be like, come on, play with me. You're working too much, and drop it at my feet. And when we're on a walk and she gets tired, she'll stop. Or if she's hot on a walk and she's tired, she'll go lay down in the shade under a tree and just stop walking. And that's a sign I need to pick her up because she actually is a little bit older now. She's already 13. So we don't go at the pace we used to go, but we still do fine. So I let her set the pace on all that now, which is another lesson for me. It's made me slow down in my walks with her. I have to be a much more patient mommy, because if you do the math, a 13-year-old dog times 7, she's over 90. So she's over a grandmother's age. So I remember that all the time when I start getting impatient with her. And, like, come on, let's go. And she's just taught me so much. So animals, whether they're domestic or wild, are certainly our greatest teachers. So we can look to the animals that are right around us. And even if you live in a big fancy city, there's animals around you. They've adapted to live, whether they be squirrels or birds or even rats, insects, okay? They've all adapted and all have lessons to teach. And remember, pay attention to your dreams too. Or if something keeps occurring to you, let's say you just had a thought about an animal, and then all of a sudden that night on TV, you're watching a show and then there's the animal. Or later you're reading a book and someone mentions the animal, or maybe a song or a friend, or I don't know, you see a billboard of it or whatever. If there's things that happen 2-3 times in a short period of time, that is not a coincidence. Okay. That is not a coincidence. That's the way the soul and great spirit can communicate sometimes. It's trying to get your attention. And sometimes if you're like me and you've got a really thick head, I always ask great spirit to just seriously make it clear, because I'm not too smart sometimes. And I can be very distracted and very stubborn and very closed-minded. Like, oh, it has to be this way. No, it doesn't. I always pray every day to be open-minded, open-hearted, open my heart, open my mind, open my soul to the truth. And I know that requires me letting go of a lot of false beliefs. And so I always asked for Great Spirit to make the communication really clear, because I'm still got my training wheels on that one. So if you see something more than once in a short period of time, that's definitely an indication it's trying to get your attention. Okay, so the ability of animals to adapt is a huge lesson for all of us. And in fact, Ted Andrews shares 4 basic lessons that every animal can teach all of us. And one of them is the ability for adaptation, whether it be physically by its fur changing in the winter when it gets cold, or hibernating, or the color of its fur, skin, feathers, whatever, camouflaging into the environment, or behaviorally. For example, the mule deer adapts behaviorally to its environment by never taking the same path to go to its watering source twice. Because if it did, it would make it too easy for predators to ambush it. Another one would be, I know there's certain foxes that have those huge ears and they look like satellite dishes. Well, those ears were grown and adapted that big because it's a way the fox will dissipate heat through the membranes in the ears, not to mention hear better. The heat is dissipated that way and the fox can keep cool. So adaptation is a huge lesson, one of the 4 primary ones that Ted Andrews shares that we can learn from the animal kingdom, how to adapt. And God knows, with the pandemic or plandemic, whatever you want to say, that whatever happened in 2020 that affected the world, we all had to learn how to adapt, right? And one thing we know is it's not the strong that survive, it's those that adapt that survive. And those that hang on too tightly to the shore and don't learn how to ride the wave and make changes on the fly as are appropriate, those are the people that will drown. And I refer you to episode, I think it's 76 with Marilyn Dumont, where we talk about the Hopi prophecy, for that matter, because it talks about how the elders warned us of the times that we're going through now and moving from the 3rd dimensional reality in 2022 and 2021 into the 5th dimension, and how it's about riding the current and staying above the water, and to learn how to and not be afraid of letting go of the shore. It's the people that hang on to the shore and are grasping for dear life to the old that are going to get washed up and drown by this raging current that's the new coming in so fast. So adaptation is critical. It is, how can I let go of the old and be open to the new? Kind of what I was referring to earlier of, how can I do this better? How can I make my life better? This isn't working for me. This isn't working for me. What can I do to adapt, change so it will work? You know, like maybe you're not sleeping enough. Maybe you're not making the time to prepare proper meals. So when you get home, you're ravenous and you just stuff your face with whatever's quick and it's not the healthiest. Then you feel horrible and then you don't sleep well. And then it's a vicious cycle because the next day you feel like crap. And then you have too much coffee and just blah, blah, blah. It's a vicious cycle, right? So that would be an example of how we have to look at adapting. Okay, how can I do this differently? I have to somehow adapt my schedule to allow for making time for proper meal prep, whether it be on Sunday nights or whatever it may be. So this is just a silly example off the top of my head. Okay, so that's number one out of the 4 key lessons from animals. Number 2 is the lesson of life, death, and rebirth. This is the cycle. We know that nature is cyclical. Nature does not go in straight lines. It doesn't work that way. Look at the shore, at the beach. Is it a straight line? No, there's curves in it. Look at the teepees, right? There's a reason why teepees were round. Even temples used to be round. Women's circles are round. By the way, I have a brand new free online women's circle that you can join. That's once a month. We meet around the time of the new moon, and just for women in a sacred private space. Women have been meeting in circles since the beginning of time. But all of life, the moon is cyclical. It teaches us the feminine is the moon. The moon is the symbol of the feminine. It is the cycle, the phases, that all of life has cycles and phases. The 4 seasons. It can't always be summer. If it was always summer, the world would burn out and dry out, right? Think of like the fires and how dry it was in California and Australia and all the fires because it was too dry. It was too hot. So we can't have that. There was no balance. So those are the cycles that we need to honor and respect. It's not supposed to be, you know what, to the wall all the time. Certainly if you're a woman, we are more cyclical than men are. That's just the way we are. Our hormones are different. Our biochemistry is different. And we are governed by the phases of the moon, whereas men are governed more by the phases of the sun. And the moon teaches us about the cyclical nature, the dark moon and the new moon, and then the first quarter moon, the waxing moon, and then the full moon, and then the second quarter moon, the waning moon, and then there's the dark moon, and then it starts all over again with the new moon. So we are not designed to just be going all the time and be quote unquote on all the time, particularly as women. It's a very hard thing in our modern culture, particularly if you have a job, or if you have a demanding life. You might be a mom with a job and you got multiple hats you're wearing. I get it. It's really hard for me to be on all the time. You know, even just running my social media or whatever, like you always want to be bright and shiny and like inspiring and happy and all that, right? But you know what? That's not realistic. It's not practical. First of all, it's not genuine to the people in your world, but it's really not fair to yourself. It's not fair to yourself to demand that because it's not natural, it's not healthy, it's not balanced. We all need to have retraction. We all need to have downtime. We all need to have quiet time. So the moon teaches us that. Part of this lesson is how the soil and the plants get fed from the sun. The sun is the source of all life in that regard. And then the sun feeds the plants and the soil, and then the plants feed the insects, and the insects then prey on the plants, and then the insects get eaten by reptiles, and then the reptiles can get eaten by birds, and the birds get eaten by mammals, and then mammals get eaten by people, and it's just a huge cycle. And then guess what? People die, and then we go into the earth, and our cells and our bodies become soil food. We become food and the earth eats us. And so it's all the cyclical nature. It's all recycled. So that's something for you to address if you are a vegetarian for the reason of saying you don't want to take life and it's cruel to kill an animal. Well, I got news for you. Plants are just as alive as animals. My show with Monica Gagliano, we talk about how plants most definitely have feelings. They communicate through sound and through scent. And we know now unequivocally that plants are sentient beings. Plants definitely feel and communicate just as much as animals do. And for that matter, just a little tangent, just make sure you know what you're doing if you're a vegetarian, because vegetarians are known to have a lot of deficiencies, and you often actually overweight or at least under muscled. They can be skinny fat, you know, that expression where they kind of got loose and flabby, or have insulin problems because they just eat too many grains, too many dates, too much fruit, basically too many carbs, and worse, non-food, too much soy and all this fake food, like these fake burgers and all. It's not even real food. I mean, that's just poison. So just sorry, but I just want to finish the side note because it's very important, because some people, and I respect that so much, I admire that if you're a vegetarian for moral reasons or whatever, please just make sure you know what you're doing. And your body, your mind, your spirit, your soul, your energy levels, your strength, your health is your report card. Okay, if you're on no medications, you're super fit, you have lots of energy, you're sleeping well, you feel good, you're able to focus, all that stuff, then it's probably working for you. And also, a last note on that, sometimes it's good to be vegetarian just for a little while. You know, just like, say if you're detoxing or something, that's cool. Sometimes even just in the summer is a great time to eat lighter, because again, with the seasons, just paying attention to the cyclical nature of life, that when we eat with the seasons, the winter is a time for more hearty soups and stews because we want to be warm and all that stuff. And we're inside, it's cozy, right? And whereas the summer, we're out and about more. And that's where the vegetables and the fruits come out. And the fruits are high in sugar. So they come out in the summer because we're designed cyclically to be more active in the summer so we can burn off the sugar. The problem is we're eating fruit all year round now with our modern technology, that we can get access to these foods all the time and not cyclically anymore. So my point was that vegetarians often get into trouble because they eat way too many carbs, and they have lots of insulin problems and hormonal problems, thyroid problems, blood sugar problems. A lot of them have that extra spare tire, and emotional problems. They can't focus, or they can't manifest. They can't get stuff done because they need to be more grounded, and nothing's going to ground you more than an animal. But it's all about how the animal was raised. If the spirit and soul of the animal and its whole kingdom was respected, for that matter, like the way it was back in the ancient days, they would never, ever take a life of an animal without honoring it first and then giving back. They always practiced the law of reciprocity, in that if they took the animal's life, a lot of times even the indigenous tribes, wherever they would sacrifice the animal to have it for food, to feed their family, they would thank it. And they would thank it for providing subsistence, and that its essence would live on in them and in their spirit, and that they would do their best to honor that animal and carry on its life by living their life in an upstanding, honorable way, as a way of paying tribute to that animal and its kingdom. And oftentimes, right where they would sacrifice the animal, they would then give back to the earth by putting one of its bones right there in that spot and burying it with a prayer of thanks, saying it was their way of giving back to the soil, to the trees, which would then grow and then would be food for the next animal, and or etc. So the cycle of life, death, and rebirth is a very powerful one to understand, and all the big ramifications of that. And Ted's third lesson from the things that all animals can teach us is that these qualities in every single one of these animals, insects, birds, aqua life, etc., are in us. All of these qualities are actually in us. And it's a really cool thing just to kind of just pause on for a moment, you know, like the busyness of a squirrel, you know, can be you. Let's say you feel really lazy or you can't get going, you know, it's like, think of how busy a squirrel is. That's one of the squirrel medicines, is how busy they are. And we can learn from that, of how a squirrel is busy, busy, busy. And that there's a piece of that in you. And the lion, okay, everyone knows the lion. And one of my favorites is the lioness, and how powerful and courageous they are, right? Well, there's that in you too. So if lion medicine comes into your life, you might want to really just ponder, like, okay, there's me. I'm the microcosm of the macrocosm. There's a part of me that is strong and courageous too. And I'm going to tap into that lion medicine in me right now and call on that lion medicine to come out in you and help you be stronger, to express and live that energy more. That's how I do it. It's really quite powerful. Which reminds me, by the way, you might want to review my episode that I did with Alyson Charles, where we talked about her book that she just wrote recently on different animals in the animal kingdom. It was a really great episode. And Alyson Charles is a shaman, and quite an accomplished one at that. And she wrote a book on different animal medicines and what they have to teach us. That was a great episode too. So the other thing about how animals teach us about the qualities that are in us is that, animals don't try to be something they're not, which is a great lesson for us to take as human beings. For example, let's just take a cheetah, okay? Now, a cheetah, say it looks at the gazelle in the field out in Africa, and it's waiting, and finally it decides to strike, and it goes and it runs after the gazelles, and the chase is on. You've always seen it on the Discovery Channel, right? And what do you know? The gazelle got away. Now, what does the cheetah do? Does it go, oh, crap. All right, you know what? Next time, I'm going to try to be more like the vulture and try to attack my prey by flying, because I tried by running and it didn't work. So screw it. I'm going to try something else and be more like the vulture. Okay, so my point is animals are true to what they are. They're true to their nature. They don't try to be something else. So if you see someone that's doing something and it's awesome to emulate, and I always say in my shows, if you want to learn something, study someone who's living and doing what you want to do. That's the best way to learn. Study someone who is successful at it. You want to learn how to do anything better, success leaves clues, right? So it's really great. It's great to be inspired by people that you aspire to be like. That's all super important. So don't mistake what I'm trying to say. I'm simply trying to say that if you're a cheetah, don't try to be a vulture, right? Use your gifts. If your gifts is speed, and that's what nature gave you, speed to catch your prey, to be able to continue your life, then cultivate your skill at speed. If you are a vulture and your skill is flying and being able to, what's called kiting, is when they kind of soar overhead and they just, they stay in one place to, strike at the right time, then cultivate that skill. Okay. So be who you are and don't try to be something else is a great lesson. And then the fourth lesson that all animals teach us is to really pay attention to the environment that's around us. I talk about this a lot, the importance of our environment, and that we have to give a lot of care and conscious attention to the environment that we surround ourselves in, not only with people, but literally with things, with energy, with landscapes, etc., because they're all very important. The environment tells us a lot about the energy that's around us. For example, outside the landscape, is it hills? Is it a marsh? Are you on the beach? This is all very, very different energy. Are you landlocked? This will very much affect the energy that's around you. So if you're not in your best, for me, I'm not at my best in the city. I need to be out in nature more to really flourish. So that's something I learned about myself. So I'm really cultivating on trying to find a new home that is in nature, because I know for me to be my best, to be the best Amy, to feel my best, to look my best, to be the most motivated, to feel the most grounded, balanced, plugged in, connected, I need to be able to have my feet on the ground and fresh air and away from all the crazy. Okay, so environment is very, very important. So ecology is actually the study of the interaction between living things and their environments. We can never really separate ourselves from the environment, but we can learn to read it so that we can use the knowledge to our benefit. So the ability to read nature is what enables us to recognize true omens in our life. An omen is just an event which may indicate a particular destiny. People from around the world have believed in omens at some point. They've held strong to the idea that the changing aspects of nature reflect changes that are likely to occur in their own life. This was just prominent in pretty much every culture, because remember, that's all they really had to go by, right? I mean, think of really like primitive human beings, like when a storm came, or, how about even just the birth of a baby? They didn't even understand how babies, where they came from and what created them and how they created them and what they were, So this is why primitive human beings evolved and developed with a certain, more than a connection with nature. It's like we were nature. It was the same thing. And they actually thought of the elements as gods because they didn't understand the forces. Like think of a tornado or a huge thunder rainstorm with lightning. That's why they thought of nature as like the God forces, and the animals were just other forms of people to them. They were other creatures, other beings, as were the trees and the plants. And they talked to them all the time, and they had reports that they talked back. And a lot of people believe now that the reason why we don't hear them talking back is because we've just kind of poo-pooed all that and developed over the centuries to think it was, silly, impossible, or the devil. So they've stopped talking and we've stopped listening. But a lot of us are now open to talking and listening again. I know I sure am. And it's just changed my life for the better. I can tell you, it's just a side note, it's just really helped me feel less alone. Even when I am alone and not with other people, I don't feel alone as much as I used to because, I have plants around me. I have just so many creatures and beings. I mean, there's life around us everywhere just because you can't see it. I mean, even in an inch of soil has like 1 billion microorganisms in it. It's insane how much life is out there that we're just not even aware of. Plus, most of us are too busy or overwhelmed and being too busy to even pay attention and notice it. So this is all just part of like changing the way that you function every day and what you pay attention to, and opening yourself up to this whole other world that's right there in front of you that could contain a lot of the answers that you're looking for. So omens were a very powerful way that primitive cultures would interpret communication from the divine. The divine forces speak to humanity through nature and its varied expressions. Omens can border upon the instinctual perception as innate resonance with natural elements that we do not consciously recognize or acknowledge anymore. As you develop the ability to communicate with animals, you'll begin to see relationships and patterns in nature and animal behaviors. And this is the key. Once you start paying attention, the thing is you want to start looking for what's typical, like what's a normal behavior, because it's really the abnormal that then is an indication that something you need to pay attention to. And that's really, really something I want to underscore in today's show, that it starts with just a foundation of observing, of paying attention, of noticing without judgment, just noticing. And then after a while, as some time goes on, you'll start to notice when something's quote unquote abnormal, right? Like, oh, that doesn't usually happen. Or, wow, I've noticed that where I live, for example, in the morning, the birds fly south. Now, and I don't mean like south for the winter. I just mean they're flying in the southern direction. Okay, because every morning, one of the things I do in my prayers is I thank the 4 directions, north, south, east, and west. So I know what direction is south in my house. And I've noticed in the morning when I see birds just kind of flying around looking for food or whatever it is they're doing, that a lot of times in the morning, they're flying south. And a lot of times in the afternoon, I noticed they're flying north. But then the other day, I noticed in the morning, the birds were flying north. And I was like, oh, and this was in the morning. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And I just started paying attention. And another thing I've been starting to do is trying to predict the weather without using my phone app. And I don't watch TV. So I've been trying to, in the morning during my prayers outside, I've been paying attention to the atmosphere and the clouds and the sky and trying to see, okay, are the clouds appearing in a certain way? Are they denser? Are they darker? Are they fluffy on top, light on the bottom? Are they more sparse? Are they more bubbly? Are there any clouds? Are there no clouds? Are they over there? Are they over here? Are they everywhere? So these are just examples of how we pay attention to just by taking the time to look. And you don't need to make a lot of time. It could be just 5 minutes. It could be just like you're brushing your teeth. And while you're brushing your teeth, you're looking out the window and looking up at the clouds. What do the clouds look like today? And then try to make associations with what the weather's like that day. So this is something I'm trying to cultivate in myself, because then I'll be able to predict the weather. And I think that's really cool. So I'm training myself not to look at my phone. And the other day I got it wrong and I got wet. But hey, you know what? Experience is the best teacher, right? So that's just one example. So with animals or weather patterns or anything, it's about observing what's normal and then paying attention to what's kind of out of a pattern that stands out to you. So you'll know automatically that certain birds or animals are likely to be seen daily. You'll come to expect certain kinds of behavior from them because of what you have come to learn of them, including their natural behaviors, sounds, rhythms, and activities. The difficulty, though, is being able to define, explain, and apply the omen of nature to your individual life. So for this to be effective, you must be knowledgeable. This is really important. You must be knowledgeable of your environment and the animals within it. You must develop the practice of seeing relationships, as I mentioned, without forcing the correspondences. You must begin to recognize that nothing is by accident or by coincidence, that all things, all people, and all animals have significance to us. You must be able to recognize that the supernatural world often reflects itself within the natural world. That's huge. It's true. The divine is with us all the time, right here, right in front of us. So it's easy to become superstitious in reading the signs of nature within your life. Most people see omens and superstitions as the same thing, but they're not, okay? Reading omens is founded upon knowledge, a knowledge base of the environment and of animals and other natural elements within it. The changing aspects of the normal natural elements in your environment can then reflect changes in other areas of your life. The changes are interpreted from a strong knowledge base and with reason. Remember that correspondence and reading the signs of nature do not need to be forced when there's a solid base of knowledge. They reveal themselves naturally. But superstitions, on the other hand, are beliefs or notions in the significance of an event or thing that is not based on knowledge or reason, okay? So it's a belief that something is significant without having a good knowledge base of really what normal really is. Superstitions often involve irrational fears and behaviors. Superstitions often involve actions that are taken to avoid bad luck. Relationships and correspondences begin between natural elements in one's own life are not formed from a knowledge base with superstitions, okay? So the best example to define the difference between omens and superstitions can be found in the behavior of the short-eared owl. Communities and societies often experience times in which rodent and other prey populations erupt. In some locales, little meadow mice suddenly erupt and seem to overrun the place. Such times were often depicted as unfortunate, evil, or even outright plagues. This perception of evil manifesting through an overpopulation of rodents was further augmented in places where overnight a horde of short-eared owls would also seem to materialize out of nowhere. For the superstitious person, one without a strong knowledge base, this might appear to be an extraordinary revelation of evil from nature, especially since both rodents and owls have a long history of being perceived negatively. For those who have a good knowledge base of both these animals, however, the interpretations would be entirely different. So this is what it's talking about again, the difference between a superstition and an omen. Many predators and prey species have years in which populations plummet and years in which populations erupt. Many rodents are subject to boom-bust cycles. For their natural predators, this cycle is often matched. Short-eared owls have an instinctual knack for appearing overnight in a horde to descend upon abundant food sources. Such appearances are not reflections of evil manifesting. Rather, their appearance serves as a boon to help restore the balance of nature. So if we didn't understand this cyclical natural balance of nature by having this knowledge base of how owls and rodents normally appear in the world, we might attribute the rodent manifestation in the overrun of the owls as some kind of bad omen. Correspondences will naturally deepen as your knowledge base grows. So you got to do a little bit of homework. In other words, you got to be educated and educated from a reliable source for that matter. The relationships between what you're expecting in nature and what you're experiencing in your own life do not need to be forced. You must be careful of not allowing your desire to divine the future to override common sense. Although it is usually safe to assume that the events within nature can and do reflect something about the events in your own life, only a true knowledge base will allow those mirrors to be clear. Nature speaks to us constantly. That's something I want you to remember on this show. Okay, as I keep saying, pay attention. Through its shapes, colors, textures, smells, and varied expressions of animal life, it communicates to us about the world and our own life. The symbolism of nature will vary according to its context. Every animal has distinguishing features, movements, shapes, and colors. Each has its own unique relationship with humans. Just as different groups of people who speak the same language may have different dialects and accents, it is the same with the way animals communicate. You must learn the dialect that's best for you. You know, it's really cool to learn that in ancient Rome, certain officials back in the day were charged with observing and interpreting natural omens for guidance in public affairs. In fact, all the leaders would do this. They would look to nature and animals as signs from the divine. These individuals actually had a name. They were known as augurs. Julius Caesar, in fact, was a very respected augur. Although originally augurs were bird talk experts who listened to what birds said, the term eventually came to be applied to anyone who used animals and their language for divination purposes. A particular branch of this came to be known as auspices in ancient Rome. Auspices was a method of reading the future in the activities of birds and animals. The ancient augurs studied nature. They learned to read her signs and understand her language. Every augur had his or her own specialty, some working with birds, some with animals, and other expressions of nature. Regardless of the area of expertise, each augur had to come to terms and develop a new understanding of nature. So if you really want to learn how to communicate with and from animals and nature and develop your own ability of augury, you must lay a foundation for relating to nature. How do you do that? Well, nature speaks every day, and we just got to listen. So if you were speaking to someone and they never acknowledged it, what would you do? Well, soon you just stop talking, right? You would just stop entirely. If you truly wish to establish a relationship with nature and animals, you must reestablish the lines of communication. And you must start with first letting nature know you're ready to listen. So Ted has put together 10 related steps to facilitate your ability to reopen communication and develop augury. Cool, right? I'm going to share them with you. They're simple and they can be applied within any living environment, whether it be a swamp, a city, a forest, a mountain, a river, farm, field, grassland. It doesn't matter where you are. They'll all apply, all 10. By consciously working with them, you'll send a message to the universe and express, especially to all of nature, that you're now open and ready to communicate. And all it takes is to hear what nature has to say and be open to listening. So the 10 steps to start your communication with animals and nature. Here we go. Number 1, experience nature firsthand. Take walks in the woods, the parks, whatever. Get outside. Take binoculars when you go to the beach. Seek out marshland. Just get outside and be in nature. Don't assume that your environment is without natural elements. I don't care if you're in the city, it doesn't matter. If there's air outside and a tree in your backyard or some grass somewhere or a patch of dirt, you've got some kind of nature there. And, when you're there, pay attention. Put your phone away. Even better, just don't even take it with you. And smell the smells. Breathe the air. Pay attention to the flowers. Notice the birds. Watch what they do. Notice if a squirrel comes by or whatever. You hear a dog barking. And try to identify the different birds. See if you can start to distinguish the different sounds they make and which bird makes what sound. And try to think about all the different trees in your environment. In a future show, I'm going to talk about the significance of different trees and what they symbolize. Number 2, begin with an examination of the wildlife in your environment. The plants, the trees, the animals. All of that has much to teach you about survival. Although some may feel that the expressions of nature within the city are nothing to shout about, a chipmunk can be remarkable as a grizzly bear at times. Trees and flowers have long been symbols of mysticism and magic, like I mentioned. They all have something to teach us, and they all are very significant with their own special medicine. Number 3, orient yourself with your landscape. As you will see in some of my future shows, the landscape can reveal much about us. And whether it be hills or, like I said, the environment is very important. Maybe it's a beach, or if you're in the city. It's all symbolic, as the animal life within it is symbolic as well, and indicative of the cycles and the adaptations. Look at the spatial symbolism of your yard or home. What does its shape say about you and to you? What is the form or pattern of the terrain? Does it appear soft to the eye? Is it hard? Is it broken? Is it sloped? Ask yourself what kind of qualities are necessary to live in such a terrain. Pay closer attention to physical signs of nature. This is number 4. These were often considered the most important elements of augury, and they can be powerful fetishes. So the 3 most common signs read by ancient augurs were, number 1, the appearances of birds and animals. Number 2, feathers, fur, stones, or any other physical fetish. And number 3, the calls, chatter, and other sounds of the animals. Those were the top 3 elements that the augurs would use to help interpret communication from the divine. So pay attention to when and where these things are most noticeable. Number 5, when you're out in nature, pay attention to what seems to stand out most strongly. Some days, a particular flowery fragrance might stand out, while on other days, it might be the continual crawling of crows. That's a tongue twister. The continual crawling of crows. On another day, you might notice a particular tree. That which you most notice when you're in nature has spoken to you, something to ponder on. So whatever really is the most noticeable to you is the thing that is truly trying to speak to you. So take note of it, greet it, acknowledge it, and then go research it. What are the qualities and characteristics associated with it? These qualities will either reflect these awakenings within you or those you may need to awaken. So they're either reflecting what's already in you actively, or they're assigned to you that you need to, tap into them a little bit more. So you can ask yourself, where can I apply these qualities? What are they saying about me and my life right now? Number 6, when you begin to take greater notice of nature and apply what you experience, it is beneficial to pay attention and special attention to the colors. Are there specific colored flowers or plants that stand out, or which are continually encountered? What are the colors of the birds you notice? Is there a significant color to any animal you come across? Keep in mind that color can be a most significant clue in the kind of energies you're likely to experience. Different colors are different energetic frequencies. We know that. Like black is usually, it can actually be death, but it can also be magic and protection. Blue is often calm and happiness and truth. Brown is usually groundedness and growth. Green is definitely growth and healing and abundance and love. Gray is integration and imagination. Orange is warmth and joy and play and creativity. Red is sex and passion and strength and primal nature, family ties. Violet is alchemy, humility, and spirit. White is purity, sharing, truth. And yellow or gold is self-esteem, communication, optimism, inspiration. Colors are frequencies in their energy, and they transmit that energy just as powerful as words or sound or shape or light. Something to consider. So the colors that are in your world and are communicating with you each day mean something. Oftentimes when I get dressed, I'll just think to myself, what color do I feel like being today? And I'll try to find something in my wardrobe that matches what I'm feeling on the inside, what I want to express on the outside. Or sometimes if I feel kind of down or blue or whatever, I might wear a bright yellow or orange shirt to try to change my frequency, my energy. So we can use colors when we know their power. So as you'll see, the colors of animals can provide dynamic insight into the qualities and energies manifesting in your life. The color reflects much about the spirit animal's energies and its applications to you. So, like for example, the black of a crow might reflect mystery or the ability to bring light out of the dark. The red fox that comes into your life one morning might reflect the awakening of Kundalini. Woohoo! The study of meaning of colors will help you determine the significance of what you experience in nature. Whether it's the color of your animal spirit or some other aspect of nature, color is an expression of energy, and it is symbolic of something positive or negative. Number 7. So another means by which you can begin to develop your ability to augur is by paying attention to the numbers associated with the animals you encounter. Numbers, like colors, have deep and ancient symbolism and associated with them, and they're a form of energy. The numbers can help you pinpoint the best areas to apply the energies of your spirit guides and your animal guides. It can also help you understand more clearly what nature is trying to communicate to you. For example, you may, upon waking in nature, find 3 crows flying overhead. Later, you might see even more crows, again in groups of 3. To some people, the crow may be a symbol of the great void, the dark, but the numbers in which they appear will alter the interpretation. 3 is also the number of creativity and new birth. So seeing 3 crows may reflect that there is going to be new birth, a new coming out of the void. The mysticism of numbers can help you in understanding animal communication. The more you open yourself to developing a wider vocabulary of nature, and that means considering color, numbers, plants, animals, etc., the more nature will speak to you and start to make sense, and the more you'll understand. How many of a particular bird or animal do you regularly see? Does that bird or animal, such as a crow, call out to you? If so, how many times? Is there a particular sound it makes, a natural rhythm? Pay particularly close attention to appearances of animals not often seen. This is especially significant if they appear more than once and in a small time frame. So numbers are very powerful. We know that number 1, for example, can be symbolic of originality, the first, the beginning, the leader. Number 2 is the duality, the feminine, and cooperation. Number 3 is creativity, birth, the mystical. 4 can symbolize foundation, patience. 5 is humanity, change, versatility, activity. 6 is home, service, family, love, relationship. 7 is spiritual, seeker, truth, wisdom. 8 is power, manifestation, money, the physical, the tangible, and infinity, because, number 8 is the vertical infinity sign. And 9 symbolizes healing, understanding, the whole, completion, holistic. For example, I'm a 9 in numerology. My birthday adds up to 9. Numbers are very, very significant and a big part of the way life communicates with us. All right, number 8. So another way of laying a foundation by which you can begin to develop the understanding animals speaking to you is by paying attention to the directions in which animals appear. Different societies associated certain qualities with each of these directions. So, for example, a bird call heard first thing in the morning in the north was believed to reflect tragedy. From the south, it reflected good harvest. From the east, it reflected good living and loving. And from the west, good luck. But as you develop your personal relationship with nature, and that's the key, it has to be your personal relationship and your own interpretations, you can then, ask and communicate and interact with nature to explain to you what they mean. And developing a relationship with your soul and yourself and your higher self, you'll be able to interpret it more accurately. So in addition to the 4 directions of the world, attention should be given to the position an animal appears to you, or any movement. Does the animal appear on your left side, your right side? Does it move from left to right, right to left, towards you, away from you? All these have significance. So in general, the right side is generally considered to be the masculine, assertive side, while the left side is considered the more feminine, receptive, and that also goes with our bodies. The right side of your body is known as the masculine side, and the left side is your more feminine side. If the animal appears on your left, it might reflect the energies are still within and not yet expressed. On the right, it might indicate that they're being expressed or need to be. If it moves from right to left, crossing your path, it can indicate its energies coming into your life, maybe even being born within you. Decide for yourself what each direction means and which movement will indicate that. Take a few minutes each day or week and just meditate on that. And by doing so, you're basically programming your mind to understand the movements. And most importantly, you're sending a signal to nature for guidance to communicate to you in a way that you're going to understand and interpret accurately. All right, number 9. Another means by which nature will speak to you is through the kinds of activity that animals may be involved in when they are encountered by you. So I've talked to you about the importance of directional movement, but the activities or lack of activity can also speak to us strongly. To understand this fully, you must understand the pattern of activity the animal is usually involved in. Like I mentioned, it's about looking for things that are out of the normal, but you can only know what's normal when you're paying attention for a period of time to pick up on normal patterns, because it's the patterns that teach us things about how to understand and interpret. So a lack of movement or activity may be a reminder for you to take a break or rest from your own activities. If you encounter squirrels that seem to be playing or chasing rather than gathering and storing like they normally do, it might tell you to take some time out to play a little bit more. On the other hand, if you encounter 2 animals squabbling, it might reflect conflicts that are present or soon to arise within your own life. Darn it. The animals and the kind of squabbling will help you to define and pinpoint where in your life this is likely to occur. So it's cool too, if you have any domestic pets, to apply that, in their behavior, because they are really, really, like I mentioned with my little Charlotte, very convenient teachers for us. So we just have to practice to learn to look for relationships between animal activities and our own lives. The last technique for developing animal communication and augury is probably the most important. and I've mentioned this at the beginning, if you want nature to speak to you and give you signs, you must ask it to. You must make a conscious effort to align yourself with nature. Things like meditating outside, spending time outside every day, at least for just even a few minutes, preferably with your bare feet on the earth. Sending your thoughts and prayers to Mother Nature, asking for signs and communications, thanking Great Spirit for giving them to you. Paying attention to what you see, hear, feel, smell each time you step outside. These are the keys. Try to find connections between what you experience and your life circumstances. Ask nature to teach you how to speak its language. Ask the animals to teach you. Tell them you love them, you appreciate them, you're grateful for them, and you want to understand them to help the world be a better place. That's what I do. Tell them that your heart, mind, and soul are open to learn from them, and that you're humble enough to know that they're here to teach you as well, and that you want to help. It is truly the best favor I think we can do for the earth, as well as for ourselves. As you develop your ability to understand what nature says to you, you begin to ask for specific communications. Watch the magic happen. And the thing is, so much of this comes down to just bringing back the awe, the mystery, the gratitude, and the reverence for life. We take so much of life for granted, just the clean air, the clouds in the sky, the sun that gives us energy and life to all things, the earth beneath our feet, the seemingly endless supply of food and oil and resources. But these are all finite things. We have to start appreciating and having more respect and reverence for all these natural finite qualities, because the earth is really at a critical point where resources are running out and Mother Earth is getting quite sick. Most of our oceans and waterways are poisoned and toxic. So many animal species, birds and insects are going extinct. We have so many creatures that are confused with all the 5G technology that are throwing off their radar in the air to fly south in the winter and migrate and not migrate, and what the aquatic life is doing in their migration patterns, because the bioelectrical signals that our satellite and all our technology is disrupting on the planet. We are at a very critical time where human beings need to wake up and pay attention and be responsible for what we're creating and how our lives are affecting all the other lives that are just as important. The plant, the insect, the rodent, the soil microorganism, the tree, they're all just as important sacred life beings as we are, in my opinion. We have to start having a reverence, a love, and a deep respect that we are all one and we all need each other. One life is not more important than the other. Humans are not the primary being on this planet by any means. We wouldn't last 5 seconds without fungus or viruses. In fact, there's more bacteria in our bodies than there are cells that you think of as you. So we need to have a return to that basic sense of respect and reverence and honor and reciprocity with all of life. And I think being open to the messages and communication of nature and animals, and respecting what they have to teach us and how it is us and how it is in us. And we can use that communication to then give back to the world and make it a better place and understand our everyday lives better, help us navigate the challenges we're dealing with better, because it is Great Spirit trying to help us. Great Spirit loves you, and it wants you to be healthy and well and thrive and be everything that you came here to be. It's always trying to communicate with you. We just have to start to learn to understand the language. So I hope this episode has helped you. If you'd like to support my show and me, the best way you can do so at this time is to either leave a review on Apple iTunes, which will only take you a second, and you can be anonymous. That would mean the world to me. You can support me in the show that way. Or you can share the show either on your social media or by sending it to a friend that you think might be interested. And don't forget, you can join my new free online women's group. You can get all that information on my website, amyfournier.com. And it'll also be in the show notes. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I already can't wait to be with you again. Would you like to support my mission to help empower people all over the world to be all of who they truly are? If so, please subscribe to the show, leave a review on iTunes, and share it with a friend. And if you're looking to take immediate action to align your energy and optimize your health, visit amyfournier.com. Thanks for listening to Awakening Aphrodite. Let's awaken her together in you. I'm your hostess, Amy Fournier, and I already can't wait to be with you again and for you to hear what I have planned for the next show.
Thanks for listening to Awakening Aphrodite with Amy Fournier. To learn more about Amy, check out her website, amyfournier.com. That's AMYFOURNIER.com. You can also check out Amy's live and on-demand virtual fitness and yoga classes, and sign up for her newsletter to receive a free mini ebook of 3 of her top tips for making holistic health a lifestyle. Again, that's amyfournier.com, and get your ebook sent to your email immediately. Connect with Amy on the daily on Instagram at FitAmyTV, FITAMYTV, and watch many of the podcast episodes and subtopic clips on her YouTube channel, which is also FitAmyTV. Enjoy, and we'll see you next time on Awakening Aphrodite.